there needs to be a transition
right.
from the white room into the real world.
Right. You need to train outdoors.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes it is ugly when you first go outside, right? Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, this doesn't feel good. It felt great inside. Right. The dog was, focused on me. The dog was easy to engage with, but now the distractions are bigger. So if you can bridge that gap somehow, that's great. Maybe that means working on the front porch for a while if you've got some space on the front porch, or if you're in an apartment, for example, maybe working in the hallway or the lobby, or, maybe even using a vehicle to transport a dog into a less exciting space. If you're in an apartment and you're in New York City, for example, and you go outside the apartment, there's no quiet space anywhere. So maybe you need to drive somewhere to find a sort of quieter in-between space. But really, I mean, don't give up when it's ugly initially, because chances are it's going to be ugly initially regardless, because now we're throwing this extra thing at our puppies or our dogs. But as long as you have put in the foundation work and you have a plan, right? So that's what's missing when there's not a training plan in place, is the what ifs, right? The if then else piece of the equation. If you haven't done training, and if you haven't started practicing skills, and you don't have a good idea of what to do in that scenario, it all just becomes ugly, right? The dog's so distracted, they're pulling, they're lunging at this, that, and the other thing, and we're just holding on to the end of the leash. But if I have my training plan in place, so, okay, I go outside with my dog and my dog is excited and distracted and goes to the end of the leash and starts pulling, and I have my sit placement, right? I can cut my leash, I can grip by the clip, I can say sit, I can guide up and place my dog, and then I can put slack in the leash. Even if my dog gets up and I have to repeat that motion, I'm still taking control of that situation, right? I'm not just letting this naughty behavior that I don't want continue to happen. So yeah, it might mean that I have to place my dog back in the sit 10 times, right? In that training session, I was only able to get, 30 seconds in total over the repetition of 10, where my dog held position on a loose lead, and where I was able to get in some rewards for him doing that. So at that point, that's session 1 under my belt, right? Now I come back for session number 2, and it might still be a little bit ugly, but maybe I get 45 seconds in total, and maybe my dog gets more rewards and I do less placements, and now he's starting to go, okay, I get it. It's valuable here too. And my training starts to override the distractions in the environment, right? So it's all a process. Like you can't expect to go out into this new scenario and have a dog go, oh yeah, I'm going to ignore all these exciting smells. I'm going to ignore all these things and pay attention to nothing but you, until you've done the training. So don't be afraid of that messy piece. Work through it. It's going to be ugly a little bit, but then it starts to get prettier. It starts to get easier.
It's like I know you are relearning how to draw and do art. I'm sure you've created some pretty ugly pieces now learning.
I have a good size sketchbook that's pretty filled up at this point. And I was showing Kip actually. I was like, okay, look at what I've been doing. And here's some of my pictures. And like the first couple, he was like, wow. These are really good. Like there was because the first couple were fairly easy. So there was a landscape scene that if you're following instructions on some of these things, it's like, oh, why did I have this be so complicated in my head before? I thought I needed to know how to like make everything look perfect right from the get-go. Well, no, first you create shapes, and then you start adding details. So initially it looks silly, and then it looks ugly. But then as you refine the details, it starts to get prettier and prettier.
That's dog training.
Absolutely.
You start with your shapes, you add your details. It looks horrible, but then it turns out great.
And then it turns out beautifully. So then as you're flipping through the book, there's an attempt to draw a dog head, and like I was working on the shapes and the proportions, and then I started adding the detail, but I actually messed up at the proportions piece. So like the nose was too big and the eyes were a little bit off in terms of being too big, and it just looks so silly. So like the first landscape looked great, and then there was a tree, and I really liked the tree too. So I was like, look at my tree. Like it looks like a tree. It looks good. And we actually spent all this time looking at the faces in the tree. And then we turned the page again, and I was like, okay, don't look at this one. And I was explaining like how it got messed up and whatnot. But there's a lot ugly pictures that I have in that sketchbook.
Think of that too when you see dog trainers. So say you're watching our YouTube videos and you see these beautifully trained dogs. We did go through ugly periods with them too. Like, like
so ugly
there's some real crazy stuff in the middle. So keep that in mind. Our dogs just don't go from little puppies to flawless. You know, there's dips and curves and all kinds of ugly things that happen along the way. And then we can present this beautiful picture.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're expecting it to look perfect right from the get-go, it's going to be horrendously disappointing for you.
Think of Shannon's art.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And you know what? I have no doubt that as I continue practicing drawing dog heads, it will get better. But right now, like, I need to work through the ugly first, and then eventually it's going to be lovely. I hope.
Yes, it will be. It will be, Shannon. You're very artistic. Yes.